Some horror films are designed to scare you. Others are designed to test you. And then there are the rare few that go so far beyond comfort, taste, and even legality that entire governments step in and say no. These are not haunted house rides or popcorn slashers built for Friday night thrills. These are confrontational works that triggered protests, censorship boards, courtroom debates, and outright bans across multiple countries. Some were accused of moral corruption. Others were pulled for extreme violence, sexual brutality, or psychological trauma that felt too real for mainstream audiences. Yet controversy often fuels curiosity, and over time, many of these films have evolved from forbidden nightmares into cult legends. They exist at the outer edge of horror, where art collides with outrage, and filmmakers push boundaries that distributors struggle to defend. These are 10 horror films so brutal they were banned in multiple countries.
Martyrs, 2008. Few films in modern horror history provoked as much global outrage as Martyrs. Directed by Pascal Laugier, this French extremity landmark begins like a revenge thriller before descending into something far more punishing and existential. What unsettled censors was not just the relentless physical violence, but the emotional cruelty that strips its characters of hope. Several countries demanded cuts, while others delayed or restricted release due to graphic torture sequences that felt disturbingly prolonged. The film's final act abandons conventional horror structure entirely, transforming into a bleak meditation on suffering and transcendence. Critics were divided between calling it profound and labeling it exploitative. Audiences walked out. Festivals debated whether it crossed ethical lines. Yet over time, Martyrs gained recognition as a deeply philosophical horror film disguised as shock cinema. Its brutality is not casual spectacle, it is the entire point, forcing viewers to confront endurance, faith, and the cost of curiosity.
Inside, 2007. Released in France as À l'intérieur, Inside became one of the most notorious entries in the new French extremity movement. Directed by Alexandre Bustillo and Julien Maury, the film traps a pregnant widow in her home as a mysterious woman attempts to carve her unborn child from her womb. The premise alone sparked censorship battles, but it was the graphic execution that led to bans and heavy cuts in several countries. Violence is intimate, close quarters, and unflinching, escalating into chaos that feels almost apocalyptic. Holiday decorations glow softly in the background while unimaginable brutality unfolds. Many territories refuse to screen it uncut due to the explicit gore and violence toward a pregnant protagonist. Despite the controversy, Inside earned critical praise for its relentless pacing and claustrophobic tension. It remains a benchmark of extremity, remembered less for jump scares and more for how far it dared to go. Grotesque, 2009. Japan has long pushed the boundaries of horror, but Grotesque crossed lines that even seasoned genre fans struggled to endure. Directed by Koji Shiraishi, the film follows a young couple abducted by a sadistic doctor who subjects them to escalating acts of torture without narrative relief. Unlike many horror films that balance violence with character development, Grotesque offers little emotional breathing room. The suffering is the story. This uncompromising approach led to bans in countries including the United Kingdom, where authorities cited its lack of moral framework or contextual justification for the violence. Critics debated whether it was cinema or endurance test. The film does not aim for catharsis or psychological nuance. Instead, it documents cruelty in clinical detail, creating discomfort that feels deliberate and sustained. For some, it represents artistic provocation. For others, it remains one of the most difficult horror films ever distributed internationally. Frontiers, 2007, directed by Xavier Gens, merges political unrest with brutal survival horror. Set during riots in France, the film follows a group of young criminals who hide in a remote inn run by a neo-Nazi family with horrifying intentions. The film's graphic violence, including torture and extremist themes, led to censorship in multiple territories and heavy edits in others. What made Frontiers especially controversial was its blending of real-world political anxieties with grindhouse brutality. the violence is relentless and stylized, but it carries ideological undertones that made regulators uneasy. Limbs are broken, bodies mutilated, and morality stripped away in a rural nightmare that feels both exaggerated and disturbingly plausible. While some critics dismissed it as excessive, others praised its intensity and social commentary. Its willingness to intertwine extremism with gore ensured it would never receive smooth international acceptance.
The House That Jack Built, 2018. Directed by Lars von Trier, The House That Jack Built ignited controversy from its premiere at Cannes. The film chronicles a serial killer's crimes over several years, presenting murder as twisted artistic expression. Walkouts reportedly occurred during festival screenings. Several countries demanded cuts due to graphic depictions of violence, including scenes involving children. Von Trier frames the horror through philosophical dialogue, challenging viewers to question art, ego, and morality. Yet the brutality is explicit and often prolonged, creating a collision between intellectual discourse and shocking imagery. Censorship boards in certain territories refused the uncut version, citing extreme content. The film deliberately provokes, daring audiences to endure its bleak worldview. Whether interpreted as satire, confession, or provocation, it unsettled regulators and audiences alike. Its bans were less about jump scares and more about its willingness to linger in morally corrosive territory without apology.
The Bunny Game, 2011. Shot in stark black and white, The Bunny Game presents itself as raw, almost documentary-style horror. Directed by Adam Rechmeyer, the film follows a runaway woman who falls into the hands of a truck driver who subjects her to escalating torment. The lead actress reportedly performed many scenes without stunt doubles, intensifying the sense of realism. This realism became the source of controversy. The British Board of Film Classification refused to grant it a certificate, effectively banning it in the UK, citing sexual violence and sustained abuse without sufficient narrative context. The film blurs the line between performance and endurance, creating sequences that feel invasive rather than cinematic. Viewers are denied traditional horror pacing or supernatural relief. Instead, the camera lingers on degradation and psychological collapse. Whether interpreted as exploitation or experimental art, The Bunny Game remains one of the most divisive and restricted horror films of the 2010s. Hostel, 2005. Produced during the rise of so-called torture horror, Hostel pushed graphic violence into mainstream conversation. Directed by Eli Roth, the film follows backpackers lured into a Slovakian facility where wealthy clients pay to torture victims. While commercially successful, it faced censorship battles and temporary bans in several countries due to explicit gore and depictions of sadistic violence. Critics accused it of glamorizing cruelty, while defenders argued it functioned as commentary on consumerism and exploitation. The surgical sequences are shot with lingering detail, turning physical pain into spectacle that disturbed regulators. Certain territories required cuts before release. Despite backlash, Hostel became a defining film of 2000s horror, influencing a wave of imitators. Its controversy highlighted how graphic content could thrive commercially while still provoking government intervention. The line between entertainment and exploitation became central to debates surrounding its international distribution.
The Last House on the Left, 1972. Directed by Wes Craven, The Last House on the Left shocked audiences with its raw depiction of sexual assault and revenge. Loosely inspired by Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, the film was marketed with the infamous tagline warning viewers to keep repeating that it was only a movie. That warning felt necessary. Several countries banned or heavily censored the film upon release due to graphic violence and sexual brutality. Shot with gritty realism and minimal budget, it blurred the line between exploitation and social commentary. The revenge narrative offers little comfort, presenting violence as cyclical rather than heroic. Critics condemned it as morally reprehensible, while others viewed it as confrontational art challenging audience complacency. Over time, it became a landmark of grindhouse cinema, but its early history was defined by outrage, confiscations, and regulatory battles that cemented its reputation as one of horror's most controversial works.
The Devils, 1971. Directed by Ken Russell, The Devils is a historical horror drama depicting religious hysteria and political manipulation in 17th century France. Its graphic sexual imagery, blasphemous themes, and scenes of torture led to bans and severe cuts in multiple countries. The film portrays a priest accused of witchcraft amid mass hysteria orchestrated by corrupt authorities. Russell's stylized direction, combined with explicit violence and religious satire, made censorship almost inevitable. Religious groups protested screenings, and distributors struggled to secure uncut releases. The imagery remains provocative decades later, blending theatrical excess with disturbing realism. While some critics hailed it as a masterpiece of political allegory, others considered it sacrilegious exploitation. The Devils continues to face distribution challenges, with certain versions still unavailable in complete form. Its reputation as a banned classic stems from its fearless confrontation of power, faith, and institutional cruelty.
Wolf Creek, 2005. Inspired loosely by real Australian crimes, Wolf Creek unsettled audiences with its bleak realism. Directed by Greg McLean, the film follows backpackers stranded in the outback who encounter a sadistic killer. Unlike stylized slashers, Wolf Creek unfolds slowly, building trust before revealing brutality. The violence, when it erupts, feels abrupt and cruel rather than choreographed. Several countries imposed bans or demanded cuts due to its graphic torture sequences and psychological intensity. What disturbed regulators most was its grounded tone, suggesting events that felt plausible rather than fantastical. The antagonist's casual cruelty contrasts with vast, indifferent landscapes, amplifying helplessness. Critics debated whether its marketing exploited real tragedies. Regardless, the film became a commercial success while retaining notoriety for its unflinching violence. Wolf Creek endures as one of the most unsettling survival horrors, remembered for the bans that attempted to contain it.
Horror has always existed to confront fear, but these films confronted something deeper: society's tolerance for suffering on screen. Governments intervened not because the monsters were fictional, but because the imagery felt disturbingly tangible. In each case, brutality collided with regulation, forcing conversations about art, exploitation, and moral responsibility. Some of these films were cut into safer versions. Others were banned outright, only to resurface years later as cult artifacts. Controversy often amplified their mystique, transforming them into forbidden cinema sought by curious audiences. Yet beneath the shock lies a recurring question: where is the line between artistic expression and unacceptable extremity? These 10 films forced that question into public debate. Whether viewed as masterpieces or mistakes, they reshaped censorship discussions worldwide. Their bans became part of their legacy, proving that horror's most enduring power lies not just in fear, but in its ability to provoke outrage.